true vintage RC, and this is the Nikko Brat build you've all been waiting to see. So you're with Jason, thanks for stopping by and checking out this video. And I wanted to say a big thank you to Keith, who has donated this Nikko Brat to myself. And what I've chosen to do is pull the car down. As we can see, it is a used vehicle. It has been driven, not by Keith, but by its owner previous to Keith has driven it. And I wanted to pull it down, tidy it all up, and have a look at all of the internal runnings of this car, making sure all the gears are okay, the belt drive and the drive line is all in good usable condition. And as it's turned out, the car is in absolutely pristine condition other than some running marks. And this is the center ball differential, and the Tamiya guys will know this as a splitter. And I will be learning more about how to get the most out of this in the vehicle, because what I'm told is that it enhances the ability for, I guess, traction with the vehicle. So I will be paying some particular attention to this out the racetrack. And thankfully I did get given a PDF copy of this manual, so I'm now following it page by page to make sure that everything's going back together as it should be. And what I'm doing is now adjusting the center diff and making sure that there isn't too much slip. So a ball diff shouldn't really slip at all, but I'm using a lot of force here by locking up two of those gears and then very, very carefully able to just get a tiny bit of slip out of that. And now we're on to the rear gear diff, and this is the first time I've ever seen 4 of these metal gears on any gear differential, so it's all new to me, and I'm being very careful to make sure all of the components that move inside of the diff are all greased carefully, because I don't want anything to run dry or overheat or prematurely wear. And my experience with the Nikko Super Sprint steel nib out drives were that they were very soft, but what I'm told is that this car is comprised of kit numbers 1 and 2, and the steel out drives are a bit more heavy duty, but more to that later on. It's interesting how many gears there are in this transmission, and in some ways it kind of reminds me of a cross between maybe an RCL incident and a Tamiya hotshot. Although it is actually belt driven, not shaft driven. But you'll see what I mean, the way that the suspension arms attach to the gearbox housing. And what I've done is I've taken particular time and care to look at every single tooth and count every tooth and every belt pulley and collate all the information so that I could share them with my friend Louis Solar down in Melbourne, who is responsible for putting together the Bash 2.0 at Knox. And these are all the details, and he said, look, just to confirm it, mark the spur gear and mark the differential gear as such. And what I'm doing is using one full revolution of that diff gear and counting how many times that spur gear revolves. So that's the second time now. We're on to the third, and it's going to go another half before we reach the top, and it comes in at a 3.61 to 1 ratio by the numbers. So thank you very much, Louis. And this is what I might mean by the gear case, how the suspension arms attach to the rear gear case here. We'll see that later on in the video. And I'm using stainless steel hex drive hardware, and where possible I've been fitting them. Now onto the front differential. Again, these are the steel out drives that I found to wear prematurely, and these have 0 wear on them, and the car has been used, so I am hopeful that we're not going to have any issues. Again, making sure everything is greased up nicely, not leaving anything to chance here. Don't want anything to overheat or prematurely wear. So I'm being very careful to make sure all surfaces are covered. and it's all going back together very nicely. There was no premature wear, nothing was worn out or chipped or broken or missing. Whoever built the car initially did a good job, and it wasn't treated poorly. And now I'm going to be assembling the belt guide plastics here. And it is a bit fiddly to do on camera, but we're all experts at this, right? So I'm putting it together, and it might look a bit ham-fisted, but it is challenging to do on camera, and I just do my best. As you can see, it's all going together in with some more stainless hardware. And I'm using an M3 tap to go into some of the plastic housing components, but I do run a 2.5mm drill bit before the tap, and it's just creating a nice thread for the M3 screws to wind into. I just wanted to make sure that's known, so I'm not just winding metric screws into where the self-tapping screws once were. I'm actually creating a M3 thread in the plastic for it to wind into. Hopefully it's going to prolong and prevent the gear casings from cracking and breaking. And I'm jumping ahead here, installing this rear block for the lower chassis plate. And here we are with the fiberglass saddle pack chassis plate of the Brat. And fear not, viewers, I will be going back and installing those threaded screws into those aluminium pieces with some Loctite, but I just wanted to do a dry run before I put any Loctite on them. And that's the gearboxes attached to the chassis plate. Now onto the steering components, and even after Keith sent me the car, some of these broke when I was pulling them apart, so I've just installed with some Kyosho items that I've had lying around. And I've opted to get rid of the alloy steering post, and I'm going to give this ball race modification a bit of a shot. I think it's working really nicely. Some more stainless hardware, and that's the steering bell cranks assembled. Now onto the rear suspension. Now Keith has been very kind in sending me some Delrin machined items which came from KC Liu. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but there's his email on the bottom of the screen there if anybody's looking to procure some of these amazing items. It just blew me away just how well these suspension components were made. And I've had to run a 3mm drill bit just to clean up the edges to get the pivot pins to run through, and I'm using some of this lubricant from Yokomo that I've had sitting around for many years just to give the car a chance to have all the suspension components pivot nicely. And yes, I'm going with the Eclipse, and I'm using some anti-wear grease into the bones that go into those steel dip out drives. Now onto the rear wing mount slash bumper, and we can see here the Delrin on the left and the original on the right. Now Keith had to glue that back together when it was sitting in his cabinet. It had broken apparently, the plastic had just been so fragile. Maybe it had been dropped at some point, I'm not sure, but these are replaced with Delrin, so it's going to help me take this car out onto the racetrack and get some laps of the car without having too many issues with silly things breaking like this linkage here. So Keith sent me some Tamiya components, and I'm just squeezing, and now I'm also using some different ball studs which are just slightly smaller, which fit the Tamiya components that Keith sent me. And again, I'm putting much longer screws, 25mm screws, into the rear housing rather than the small ball studs, just to hopefully protect that gear case. Here we are now moving on to the front suspension, and I'm being very careful with these yellow front shock mounts attaching to the front gear casing, because I saw some small cracks in the gear casing. Now, they also do Delrin front steering knuckles, but I'm staying with the front alloy ones at this point. And it's interesting to know that there were some different caster options from the kit. So I'm using the original, well, not original, I'm using the Delrin original caster block. So I'm not using the reduced caster block, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to ear clips and go to pivot pins, and it's all going together very nicely. Here we are now on to fitting the front suspension arms, and the pivot pins wind in through the steel bracket at the front of the gear casing. And again, I'm using some anti-wear grease on the bones that go into those steel outdrives, just hoping to prevent any premature wear that could come about. And the car's just going together very, very nicely. Everything's just super smooth. I made sure all the pivot pins have a very snug yet loose fitting into those arms, and everything works nicely. Now onto the sway bars. And when you look at this whole car, it's interesting that maybe it wasn't super competitive at the 89 Ifmar, but it would have been a great car for the 87 Ifmar. So perhaps it was just released a little bit too late. But good on Nikko for having a go at it. And that's the chassis built. Now onto these amazing shocks. Now I really do like these shocks, and I really like the colour. But check this out, even the shock cap above the diaphragm, you've got the hole in the shock cap to allow the shock to breathe. Well, not to breathe, but to compensate for the oil on the air. Now, shock shafts were a bit used, obviously, so I've wet sanded and polished, and it came out really well. And I'm pre-drilling the shock pistons because I found they were just a little bit too small. I'm running in the rear, I'm running 30 weight oil, and in the front I'm running 35, and that drill bit size I think was about 0.75 millimeters, and it just is super smooth. I'm very impressed with these shock absorbers, just so well made. You wouldn't think a toy brand would make shock absorbers so nice, but yeah, kudos to them, very happy with them. And now they're all just going together as per the manual. Super smooth. I've always liked the purple shocks over the gold shocks. Now onto fitting the shocks onto the suspension arms, and there we go. Yep, I really like them. Another really cool feature of this car was that standard it had a saddle pack chassis, so Nikko Brat having a saddle pack chassis car, it just blew me away, not a stick pack or anything like that. And here's a bit of a nod to where this car is going to go. I've got some 1700 SCE match cells in there, and these wheels are very unique to this car. I don't know any other wheel that would fit directly on those axles. And the tyres, as much as I like them, they're almost made of plastic. They are rubber, but they're very hard. So I'm opting not to use them. I'm going to put them to one side. And here's another nod to the 1989 Ifmar, was these hot laps tyres that were actually pictured on the car in that magazine off the grid at the 89 Ifmar. So they are TR9s, I'm pretty sure. And these are some more hot laps I had that I found that would fit on the front. Now I don't have a big supply of these, so I just thought I'd trial them and see how they go, but they do fit the rims very nicely. The drivetrain's super free. I'm very happy about how nicely it all went back together. Yes, some flashy red alloy wheel nuts there. And even the rear wing mount has a plate similar to maybe like the Hot Shot. So you can see where some of the designs of this car might have originated from. And they're held in with a body pin. On goes the wing now. And the body shell. Thank you very much, Keith, for setting this body back. I really like this body. I think it's going to look great going around out the racetrack. And boom, she's done. Now, this is not the last time you'll see this car on the channel. I'm going to be assembling it further with some electronics and gearing it up for the racetrack at Bash 2.0 down in Knox, Melbourne in November. So please come back again and see where I'm going to go with this car next. Thank you very much also to Louis and to Richard for putting together this very helpful chart for different motors and gearing options of the car. And I appreciate you stopping in and checking out the Nikko Brat video. So thank you very much, guys, and I hope to have you back for the next one. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll catch up again soon. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.